And I noticed she was a bit off. She sat down and she was like, "Oh, I was in the hospital." And I was like, "Oh my God, is everything okay?" And she was like, I try to commit suicide." I would tell them, "You are worth it. You are meant to be here. And please seek professional help. But most importantly, you are worth it." I always say in another interview, I said, my son is like my saving grace because he
Yeah.
was the one that saved me without even knowing. So there was many nights where I questioned myself, I doubted myself, and like you said, a lot of lonely days where it was just me and him. I call him my hustler baby because he went everywhere with me. So I'm always amazed of how, you always say like, yeah, you have your blood family, but the
Yeah.
real ones, the ones that you pick. Oh my God, it's just me, my son, and then my job, and that's it.
Mm,
That's all I have. Which now
mm.
I think about it and I'm like, that was enough.
That was all
That
you.
that's all I needed. Social media is such a beautiful platform when used the right way. It's just amazing.
When used the right way. You said it. Hello, and welcome to another episode and another season of the Woman Witness podcast on the Woman Witness TV network. On this podcast, we bring to you dynamic stories of faith, resilience, and transformation to empower you and strengthen you and inspire you on your journey with God, family, and community. Each episode, we deep dive into the lives of incredible women who have faced challenges and embraced their calling and found courage to rise stronger together. Here at the Well, we believe that your testimony of God's goodness and His grace together can grow, uplift, and support one another. So join us each week, each Monday, as we drop a new episode of a new woman who wants to share their story of resilience and how they overcame their journey and to change the world around us. So today I have another special episode with another special guest, a woman of resilience. She has a story, and I'm pretty sure that you're going to want to hear it. Before I introduce her, let me just set the stage for you today. Today, we will be speaking with Cynthia Martinez. Cynthia Martinez, she has a story that we'll talk about, the story to explore her healing journey and living out your dreams and visions. In a world filled with noise and doubt, it is easy to let our voices that speak against us, those voices that bring up our past, those voices that keep us held and keep us in bondage. It is important to fight through those voices and to find your own voice and find your own testimony. Today, we'll speak with Cynthia Martinez, and she'll tell us and share with us her story of being able to overcome those voices and set down the path towards her visions and her dreams. So, today, without further ado, I am so excited to introduce you today, my guest, Cynthia Martinez. Hey, Cynthia, welcome to the Well.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much.
Oh,
Beautiful
well,
introduction.
well, thank you so much for being here, Cynthia. I'm so excited to talk to you, and I'm so glad that you reached out to us. And you shared something with us right off the top. You said that you wanted to talk about your healing journey and being able to take this year, this season in your life to live out your dreams and your visions. And that's by silencing all those noises and all those things that speak against your calling that God has for you in your life. And I'm excited that you're bringing it here to this well to speak to some of us women who may be in that same seat with you or where you were once were.
Yes, yes, I'm very excited to share with you my story.
Well, great. Okay, so let's just start off. I want to give you the floor. I felt like I talked absolutely enough. So share so let me give you the floor, Cynthia. Share with us a little bit about that moment when you share with us a little bit about your testimony and who you are.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'll start with my testimony, which kind of leads into my healing journey. So, at the age of 10, I was sexually abused. My parents, I'll start all the way from the beginning. So, my parents in the summer, they just couldn't afford camp or a summer program for me and my brother. So what my mom would do is she would send me to Dominican Republic to stay with my grandmother. And my grandmother would watch us for the entire summer. And on one of those vacations, in a family house at night, I was sexually abused. And that's when I learned how to kind of just mask and hide my emotions because I didn't tell anyone. I kept it quiet till this day. I didn't want I first I thought it was my fault. You know, you go through stages when that happens. At 9, I wasn't fully sure what was going on, what was happening, what that person was doing to me and my body. And then after it was done, I was told to keep quiet, not to tell anyone, or I was the one that was gonna be blamed for it. So, of
Mm,
course, I didn't say anything, I kept quiet, and yeah, sadly, at a very young age, I learned how to suppress my emotions and I just learned how to be this perfect child for my parents and this straight A student
yeah.
and never bring any problems to my mom or my grandmother from that one instant.
Mm.
And then from there, of course, that led to me developing depression, which at the time I had no idea.
No
But
idea what
as I,
that was. Mm.
right, yeah, as I went through my healing journey, and now that I can look back, I can for sure say I 100% was depressed at a very young age because of that instant. Yeah, so life went on. I kept quiet. I didn't say anything. It was a one-time occurrence.
Mhm.
And then at the age of 15, when I started high school, I was in music class. And this is very important because this is the power of words, right? I was
Mhm.
in music class and I was very nerdy, very shy. And I sat next to this girl that we just instantly became friends and we just connected in this
Yeah.
music class. I was a freshman in high school and we would share notes. And, when she didn't understand, I was very book smart. So I kind of let her copy my homework because
Yeah.
I craved for that friend and she was it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then the following week, I go to music class. I don't see her. Mind you, this was back in the days where there was no cell
No cell
phones,
phones.
no Instagram, no social media. So I didn't see her. I didn't think much of it. I was just like, okay, she's absent. Then the following week, she wasn't there. And that went on for about 3 to 4 weeks, almost a month, where she did not attend music class. And
Mm.
I didn't, there was no cell phone, no nothing. And I was like, man, I just wonder what happened to her. Finally, after a month and a half, she comes back to class and I'm like excited. I'm like, oh my God, where were you? Like, what
Mm.
happened? Just throwing her all the questions. And I noticed she was a bit off. She sat down and she was like, oh, I was in the hospital. And I was like, oh my God, is everything okay? And she was like, I tried to commit suicide. I
Oh,
went in my
God.
room and I put a rope over my neck and I tried to hang myself. And then my mom, thank God, my mom found me and she pulled me up and I was rushed to the hospital. While I was
Mm.
admitted to the hospital, they realized that she had a whole bunch of cuts in her wrists.
Mm. Mm.
And this was a time where mental health was not spoken of.
Yeah.
I grew up in a household, Hispanic culture, where that is not spoken and it's a
Mhm.
taboo. So I had
Mhm.
no idea what suicide meant. I had no idea what cutting was. I was completely lost when she
Yeah.
started telling me. And I was like, I don't understand, like, why would you
Yeah.
do that?" And she was like, "Just a lot of things are happening at home and I don't wanna live. I have a lot of internal hurt."
Mm.
And when she said that, it was like a light bulb in my world went on because I said to myself, "This is it. If she has all these internal pain and this is the way she's coping with it, then I can do the same." At 14,
Uh-huh.
15, I didn't know any better. So her words really impacted me in a very negative way, right? But I was just like, this is it. This is my answer, right?
Answer.
To me suppressing all my emotions from 9 all the way until I was like 15. And I was
Yeah.
like, this. Then I remember I was like, okay, so like, how are you cutting yourself? And at that point, I just wanted to know her tricks and her ways so I can do the same. And she was like,
Mm.
"Oh, just with any sharp object, it just really like the pain
Mhm.
just makes me
Was
feel
she
good."
telling she was telling you because she just thought that how did she wasn't telling you to instruct you. She was just telling you, like,
Right.
how she was, what okay, got it.
Yeah. Yeah, because my
Mm.
question, because for me, I didn't see
Mhm.
her for a whole month, so I was in shock, then I was just like, "Oh
Right,
my god, what's going on?" So she's just telling me what's going on in her world. So
right.
she's not really knowing that she's kind of instructing me in a way, and,
Yeah,
like, kind of
yeah.
like that was, like, my moment of, "Oh my god, I can do the same," because she had no idea what was going on internally with me.
Mm,
So, I remember that day very specific. Like I remember all the detail. I even remember what she had on, what I had on. It's just crazy how our mind works because I
yeah,
remember that entire conversation, what we had on, and then from there on, it's almost like that memory is just erased. Like, I have no idea what happened to her from there on. I do
really.
remember that day I went home and I was like, "Alright, I'm gonna try to cut myself," right? Because if
Mhm.
she's saying this can take away her pain, then I wanna give it a try.
Yeah.
So I waited for everyone to go to sleep in my house. My dad would do night shifts and he would leave around 5,
Mhm.
7 after dinner. So I waited for everyone to leave, everyone go to bed, and I proceeded to go to the kitchen and I grabbed a random knife, a kitchen
Mhm.
knife,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure why, but for whatever crazy reason, I went to cut myself in my wrist and I was like, "No, let me put it over the fire so the pain can be triple." And
Oh.
I put the knife over the fire and then I proceeded to cut myself. And
Mm,
unfortunately, that was the beginning of me becoming a cutter. And
mm,
it was exactly how she described it. It was the
mm.
release of that internal pain, and it just felt so good at the moment, of course,
Yeah,
right? Not
yeah,
fully healed.
yeah.
And, sadly, I did it, it just went downhill
Yeah.
from there. I did it from the age of 15 all the way until my mid-20s,
Oh,
and
really? Yeah.
yeah, I became, I would say, a pro, right? Because I knew exactly how to hide
I
my
was gonna
wound. Yeah, I knew exactly how to hide my wounds. I was the one that had, long sleeve on a hot summer day. And my excuse was always like,
Mm.
"Oh, I'm always cold." That was
Yeah,
always like my excuse. So I would just have a
yeah,
whole bunch of like hair scrunchies on one side of my
got
arm
it,
because I didn't want anyone to see all the cuts. So
got
yeah,
it.
I
So you just did typically, do you just do one side so you can have the other one free so it wouldn't bring attention to?
yeah, yeah. I did
You know,
it to my left side.
can I ask you something, and not to detour your story, but I find it how God works. Do you feel that because of your experience, do you feel that you can point that out in any person?
Oh,
Could
yeah,
you point it out?
100%. I can point it out. I've never encountered that
Not yet.
yet where I can point it out, but I'm pretty sure because I was very functional. I was a cutter for many years,
Mm.
but someone that would have never experienced that would have just seen me and said, "Oh,
Yeah.
she's just like a
Cold.
perfect." I was a straight A
Yeah.
student. I was involved in every activity and everything you can think of. So you would A, never know that I was depressed, and B, never know that I was a cutter.
Do you feel that in that moment, or looking back now, do you feel that maybe it would have been great if someone would have just found out? Or did you ever have that moment in your during that time where that you wish somebody would have inquired?
In the midst of it, I had one time where I was walking out with my mother. We lived in the Bronx in an apartment building, and we were walking out, not sure where we were going.
Mm.
And I held the door for someone. And as I was holding the door, I guess my sleeve of my shirt went down, and my
Oh,
mom was right behind me, so she was able to see all the cuts, and she grabbed my hand and she was like, "Cynthia, what is that?" And I was like, "Oh, no, nothing. I just, in school, I used to do dance. I was
yeah,
part of, like,
yeah.
a ballet group, and I
Mhm.
just made up some, like, lame excuse. I was just like, "Oh,
Right.
yeah, like, during dance, I, like, we scratch each other, whatever." I don't even know what I said.
Yeah.
And she was just like, "Okay." And I just, like, brushed it off. I changed the conversation, and then we just went about our day. So at the moment, of course, right, I wish
Yeah.
no one would have found out. But now looking back, I'm like, "Man, I wish someone would have
Yeah.
just seen me, how much I was suffering, and reached out to me and helped me."
And I want to ask you this as we segue into another part, because this is part of your journey, your testimony, your healing journey. And if you were to, let's say someone is listening right now, a fully functional adult, let's say, what would you want them to hear at this very moment in regards to your beginning and the ending of your cutting? What would you want them to
If
know?
someone who's also going through the
Who's
same
going through it
situation,
right now? Yeah. They haven't
uh,
found a way out.
I would tell them, "You are worth it. You are meant to be here, and please seek professional help. But most importantly, you are worth it. Like, you are meant to be here. Don't let any voices tell you otherwise, because you are meant to be here for a purpose."
I thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story, because I think so far often, especially for those of us who've had an abusive, trauma-filled childhood, and that reality does not go away. It kind of stays with you. And I love how amazing God is, because He has a great way of turning that pain into purpose. I never knew
Mm,
that my abusive, trauma filled, every type of abuse that one can possibly think of, and I never thought that God could turn it into a positive. That I would be here being a witness right now to something that I would rather forget about. So that's why
mm.
I thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your story, because perhaps your story could help heal someone else. I want to talk to you about some of the challenges that you face during your early stages of going through this healing journey. How did you decide, what was that pivotal moment that said it's time to make a change?
When I was about 20 or 21, when I was 16 or 17, I just wanna bring it back a bit, I
Okay.
was diagnosed with scoliosis, which is a curve in your spine.
Okay.
And at the time when I was 16, my curve was very small. It was
Mhm.
manageable, and I can correct it either with a brace or
Mhm.
doing yoga. There was different things besides
Mhm.
surgery. But then when I was 20, 21, it was just impossible. It was like very painful. And then the curve got to a point where I needed surgery. So at the age of 21, I had surgery, and they, of course, gave me morphine every 4 hours. I had to learn
Mhm.
how to walk again. I had to redo a lot of things that I was familiar with in this, surgery. The one thing that caught my attention was all the morphine that they were giving me. It just put me on this high, and it
Mhm.
just felt so good with all the pain that I was still suffering. And
Yeah.
then when I was released from the hospital and sent home, they sent me home with a prescription of oxycodone.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I became an addict to oxycodone. So from the age
Mhm.
of 21 until 23, again, it was another like another aha moment where I
Yeah.
was like, "Okay, I don't have to cut myself. I can just, take these pills and this is better because no one's really gonna see." The cutting became a
Mm.
little too much, and it was, like, kind of hard to keep up with covering it. So I was just like, "Okay, I can just keep popping these pills and no one's really gonna know." And
Yeah.
that's exactly what I did. And again, I was 100% functioning. I was in college. I was a straight A student, scholarships, had internship. I
Wow.
don't know how I did it.
God.
Yeah, God.
Wow.
And at the time, I was married, my first marriage, and I found out I was pregnant with my son. And
Wow.
that was the moment where I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I cannot keep doing this. Like, I have to put an end to everything
Mm.
because I'm going to have someone that's going to look up to me. Like, I just can't. I have to stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did just that. As soon as I found out I was pregnant, I just took all the pills, I flushed it down the toilet, and I wasn't cutting for a while because I had replaced the cutting with the
Okay.
pills, and then I just completely stopped. So I always say in another interview, I said, "My son is like my saving grace," because
Yeah.
he was the one that saved me without even knowing it, right? Because at the time, of course, I was terrified when I saw that positive pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And I was young, I was at the, like, almost last semester of college, and I was like, "Oh my god," like, "What am I gonna do?"
Yep.
But my first instinct was like, "Okay, I can't keep popping
Baby.
these pills, like, I gotta get my
Yeah.
act together." Yeah. So he was really the
Mhm.
beginning of my healing journey. It's been a long healing, but he was the beginning of it. He was the one that as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I stopped cutting myself, I stopped taking pills. Then when he was 2, 3, I realized I married for all the wrong reasons, and I realized that I wasn't happy, and if I wanted to break this cycle, which was a very similar I was in a similar relationship, marriage to my parents, right? Because
Interesting.
we kind of follow that
Mimic.
pattern.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I realized when my son was 2.5, I was like, if I want to break this cycle, it has to start with me and it has to start now. I'm unhappy. I married for the wrong reasons. And if I want him to have a happy mother, then I have to be happy.
What was that pivotal moment? What was that aha, like, okay, this is this is the last straw? What was the straw that broke the camel's back on that?
It was something very silly. And I remember the moment my son was 2.5 when we took him to Sesame Place for the day. And I just remember being at the park, and I had this sense of I was just sad and depressed. And I just remember saying to myself, like, I don't love the person I'm with. And the longer
Mm,
I stay in this relationship, I'm just hurting both of us. And I
mm,
saw the way my mother grew up. My mother was in her
mm.
relationship and her marriage. It wasn't a happy marriage. It was very obvious when I was around 13, 14 that they were just together because of me and my brother. They just
Yeah.
wanted us to have both parents in the same household. So in that time, I
Mm,
was just like, it seems like I'm following the same pattern and doing the same thing so my son can have a mom and dad in the same household.
yeah.
And I was just like, this is not it. This doesn't feel right. So I have to put an end to it. So it was,
Yeah. And
random
that takes
Sesame
courage.
Place
That is
park.
Yes, that takes courage. That's strength to, because I believe that a lot of us grew up in that, Cynthia. A lot of us, grew up where, the old folks be like, honey, he's a good man. He may not be
Mhm.
that good, but you just got to stay with him anyways. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I don't know about that advice anymore. Like, that advice comes with consequences.
Yes.
Depression, our kids, they're watching the same cycle over and over again. And how long can we put on that facade and just keep moving forward? Like, I admire your strength in that. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, you're good. Yeah, that was the moment where I was like, I can't. And I just felt like it was like this sense of depression that came on. And I was just like so tired, like you said, of putting this front for my son. Like, oh, here's your happy mom and,
Yeah,
happy dad, and they're in love. I was just like,
yeah.
I don't wanna do that. I truly wanna fall in love. I truly
Mm,
wanna be in a healthy and loving relationship. And that just wasn't it. And it by far was probably one of the hardest
mm,
decisions that I had to do because, like you kind of mentioned, in the Hispanic culture,
mhm.
you put that under the rug, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we're perfect. Like, oh, we're
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah.
So when
Mhm.
I made that decision to get a divorce, till this day, it's been 12, 13 years. I have about 80% of my family that do not talk to me because I got a divorce. So
Oh.
according to them, I'm a disgrace. Like that's very
Mm,
unacceptable. Like, we don't
mhm.
do that. Like, you just fix it, right? Like you
Oh,
don't put
yeah.
your out there. You just
Yeah.
fix it and move on with it. So
Yeah.
sadly, till this day, there's a
Yeah.
lot of family members that, we've lost touch since then and we do not talk because of that.
Hold on, Cynthia. Let's talk about breaking generational curses, generational behavior. Because if
Yeah.
we want to see the change, sometimes we have to be the change. And by us being silent, by us suppressing our feelings, by you not even, being able to tell what happened to you, and for those people who may be listening who may still be holding in some of those, childhood memories, that even you are part of a family who says be quiet, don't worry about it, that go away, you'll forget about it. That's not okay. So I'm glad that you are that, or being that one, that voice. And sometimes it feels like you're alone for a long time.
Oh,
So but
yeah.
I
It
do
did.
believe that I do believe that God gives you a new sense of family, more people
Yes.
who just happen to be just like you, who have to be that one to break those generational curses. Okay, go. I'm sorry. I get passionate about this. I
No, no.
do. I
I
do. I
agree.
really do.
Everything yeah, no, everything you said, it's like spot on because there was so many nights where I cried myself to sleep because I was like, "Man, am I making the right decision?" because in the background, I had all these family members telling me, I'm a disgrace. Like, how dare I, get a divorce? Forget about getting a divorce.
Yeah.
I took him to court for child support. That was
Oh,
probably one of the biggest disgrace, according to my family, that I ever did. Like, how dare you take him to court for money? Like, you don't need his money. And I'm like, I'm not doing it for me. I'm
yeah, it's
doing it for my
fun.
son. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was many nights where I questioned myself, I doubted myself, and like you said, a lot of lonely days where it was just me and him. I call him my hustler baby cuz he went everywhere with me. And luckily, the court granted me to move. I was allowed to move out of state with him. So I got full custody. And on top of that, I was also allowed to move out of state. At the time, it was my first year working at Ernst and Young. It was like my first big job
Wow.
after college.
That's
And it was in Connecticut. So one of the requests that I submitted was if I am able to move out of state because my job was in Connecticut, I lived in New York,
mhm.
and luckily they did. They granted me that.
What
So
is that distance? I'm sorry, Cynthia, for those of us who don't know. What, like an hour? An
yeah, so
hour?
it like
Okay.
an hour and a half, yeah. So
Okay.
Stamford, Connecticut, and then I lived in the Bronx. So I was driving back and forth every single day, an hour and a half. So I was just like, okay, I told my lawyer, please request that I'm allowed, to move out of state. Luckily, they agreed and I was
Mm,
granted that. So I think 4 or 5 months later, then I moved to Connecticut. And like you said earlier, I was able to pick my family because
wow.
I met friends from work, outside of work. I met my husband at
Yes.
work, and
Mm,
I was able to pick my family. It was almost like I was able to rebuild my
mm,
family tree, and they
mm,
have loved on my son like nobody else. Until this
mhm,
day, friendships of 12, 13 years. So I'm
mhm.
always amazed of how, you always say like, yeah, you have your blood family, but the
Yeah.
real ones, are the ones that you pick.
Yes, yes. And sometimes, and I hate to say it, but I don't know, when you said this to me, it just reminded me of Abraham. When God told Abraham to leave your family, and go to the place that I will show you. Like, for me, in my mind, I'm hearing your story and I'm like, a place that I will show you sounds scary, Lord. Like, how are you
Yeah.
supposed to know that if I move an hour and a half away from the people, my support system, my rock, right? Although they may not be the best, they may be a little flaky sometimes, and I only talk to 20% of them, but at the end of the day, they're still your family, right? That's
Yeah.
scary. That is
Yeah.
so
And I
scary.
had Yeah, in when I was living in the Bronx, I had so my support system throughout my whole divorce was my mom, which by the way, I was actually surprised, right?
Yeah.
Because when I said I was getting a divorce, in my mind, the first person that I thought that was gonna judge me, criticize me, for me, 100% was my mom. I was
Yeah.
like, for sure, my mom's gonna be extremely disappointed.
Yeah.
Turned out she was the one that supported me the most. Like,
Mm.
her support, so it was her, my grandmother, and my cousin. They were my biggest cheerleader, and I
Yeah.
moved away from that. They were helping me, do pickups, do drop off. At the time, my son was 2, going to daycare, so they were helping me,
Yeah.
do all this. And
Yeah.
like you said, I decided to move to another state by myself without knowing anyone, just the people I worked with, and that's it. So,
Mm.
yeah, there were many days where I was scared, I was terrified, I was like, "Oh my god, it's just me, my son, and then my job, and that's it.
Mm.
That's all I
Mm.
have." Which now
Mm.
I think about it and I'm like, "That was enough.
That was all
That wa
you
that's all I needed."
say it again, Cynthia. That was enough.
Yeah.
That is so good. I mean, we could just sit there with that forever because I think so many times, especially when we are carrying all of that baggage with us, it is scary. But and then when we drop it off and then we look at ourselves and we say, okay, Lord, you said that you're going to show me this dream. You gave me this vision, and I don't know what that's going to look like. All I have is me. What did you say? You had me, my son, and my new
And
job.
yeah.
And God, and that was enough.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Talk to us about following those dreams. You said you looked at your life. You were like, this is not the way it's supposed to be. I'm taking this step. I'm making these changes. You stop doing a lot of the things that you were doing. I'm pretty sure that you had some noises in your head, some things that are saying you can't do this. This has never happened for you. Talk to us about those times, those challenging times.
Yeah, so, I had a mother who was very judgmental, and in her eyes, I had to be this perfect A
Mhm.
plus honor roll student. So, during my time, I always had her voice in the back of my mind that I was never enough. And when I got my first job out of college, I'm a tax accountant. I wanted to make it to one of the big four companies. There's like four or five companies who are like, we call like the big four. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, I have to make it to the top. But it wasn't necessarily for me. It was just so my mom can be proud, just so she can say, wow, that's you did it.
You
That's
did it.
good. Yeah, and I did. I made it to Ernst& and Young, which is I think they're like top 3. They're like on that top 4 list.
Yeah.
And, I worked my butt off, and while I was there, I was like, "I wanna, climb this corporate ladder because I wanna make it to the top." And, as I went through my career, I sure did. I climbed that corporate ladder. And,
Yeah.
just going really quick with my story, I found
Yeah.
my husband. We met working together. He's also a tax accountant, so we met at Ernst& and Young. I
Yes.
think 3 or 4 years later, we got married. We blended our beautiful family together.
Mhm.
So he has 3 kids. I had
Yeah.
my son, so 4 overall. And then
Oh,
during the
jeez.
pandemic, 2021, we got pregnant with our son. And that
Yay.
was the moment when I had him where I was like, I have to do my internal healing now.
Mm.
Because I'm not
Yeah.
a cutter anymore and I'm not addicted to oxycodone, but I felt like I had a lot of bitterness towards a lot of things, right? Towards my family for leaving me, abandoning me. I had bitterness towards my mom, not fully
Mhm.
understanding that at the age of 9 I was sexually abused and kind of
Yeah.
just leaving me out in the wild, right? As
Mhm.
I would say. So
Mhm.
I had like a lot of bitterness towards a
Mhm.
lot of things. And I was like, if I want to fully live my life, then I
Yeah.
have to do the internal healing.
Yeah.
And I did. I went to a physical therapist for 2 years, and I put in the work. I did all the internal healing. And then at the end of it, I was just like, okay, now it's my time to shine. Now it's time
Mhm.
to live out my dreams, the things that I fully want to do. Because being a tax accountant behind a desk was never my thing.
Oh, okay. Well, you didn't say that. That's interesting.
Well,
Okay, go ahead.
I did it more because again, my mom, she was a tax accountant back
Got it.
in
Okay.
Dominican Republic, and then when she came here, her certificate wasn't valid here. So then she went into the nursing field, and then she was a nurse up until she retired. So I
Got it.
remember when I was, picking what I wanted to do, in college, I started off as a journalist major because I've always
Mm,
loved the idea of storytelling. And I was like, oh,
mm,
I want to be, a journalist because I love
mm,
interviewing, being interviewed. And,
mm.
as a freshman, I was like super shy, very timid. And as I started taking classes, I was like, oh my God, yeah, no, this is not for me. Like I'm too shy for
Yeah,
this. So I was like, "All right, what am I gonna do?" And I was like, "Well, let me just do something that's gonna, my mom's gonna be proud of." So of course,
got
the first thing I
it.
thought was, "Oh, I'll be an accountant just like her, and I'll do it better than her, so she
Ah,
can really be proud."
yes, got it, got it, got it, got it. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I love that. I love that journey. I wanted to ask you, when you're talking about reflecting on your journey, you did the you started doing the counseling, and then you said now it was your time to step out and do what you feel that you were being called to do. When did you start your podcasting? And then I seen you have a group called, let me let you talk about the social girls, and let me let you talk about that era.
Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah. So this year, 2024, around January,
Mhm.
February, that was when I was like, okay, I'm gonna start my podcast, which is something that I've always had in the back of my mind.
Mhm.
But of course, right, the voices, the imposter syndrome starts
Yep.
creeping up.
Yep.
And I've always wanted to start a podcast for about 3, 4 years. I actually
Interesting.
started one with someone, but we only got to release, I think, like 2 or 3 episodes. We didn't have the same vision. So we kind of parted ways respectfully.
Yeah.
And then ever since then, I'm like, do I do a podcast? Like, who would want to listen to me? Like, you
Yeah.
start doubting yourself. And
Yep.
then I started with well, I have no idea what platform to use, like what mic,
Yep.
what setup, you know how
Yep.
that goes.
Oh yeah,
And then,
that'll keep you
yeah.
stuck for about a year.
Oh, yeah, it got me stuck for, like, 3 years.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
And then
Yep.
finally this year, I was like, "You know what? I'm not gonna have all the equipment, all the setup.
Nope.
I'm just gonna start because
Just do it.
I have a story to tell." And
Yeah.
I think about Cynthia, who was 15. I think about that conversation that I had with that girl from my music class. And what if I had stepped out of that class and I had heard a podcast talking about mental health, someone being a cutter, someone surviving
Mhm.
that? So I think about all this and I think about the people who are suffering and who are cutters and who are addicted that need to
Mhm.
listen to this story.
Mm.
So to me, it was just easy after thinking
Yeah.
about it that way. It was just like, yes, like I have to start this podcast. It's gonna be messy. Is it gonna be perfect? No, but I have to start. And as I started, it has been the best experience. Now I'm kicking myself because I'm like, I should have started like a year ago.
Don't kick yourself. Cynthia, I did the same thing. Don't kick yourself. God prepared you all the way for this moment, and now you're
Yes.
walking in it. And I'll tell
Yes.
you, for all of those who are listening right now, watch her podcast. Go watch it, subscribe, and literally, I could not turn them off. I literally like, okay, you have to put on. I'll tell you one thing you have to do. Put on your repeat. So
Oh,
it's not
yeah.
repeat, but your next up button. It's the next up button, because I had to go in there
Yeah.
and oh wait, let me go back and get to the other one. Watch them; they're all great. Okay, so go ahead. Sorry, talk to
Thank
us
you.
about
No,
social girls.
you're fine. Yeah, so I started the podcast. It's called, The Glow Up Social Girls.
Okay, got it.
Um,
That's the name. Okay.
Yeah, that's the name of the podcast,
Mhm.
and the whole vision behind the podcast is that I wanna create a real authentic community of just women who come around the table and just storytelling, right? Because
Mhm.
I found through the years, when you start a conversation with someone and you start storytelling, it's just so powerful, the impact that it has on some it has an impact whether it's on you or someone you know. There's always that connection
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
made when you start that conversation. So
Yeah.
that's the whole vision behind the podcast. I bring on different guests from all sorts of,
Yeah.
walk of life,
Yeah.
and we just sit down and we just have a conversation similar to this. Like, so tell me your
Yes.
journey. Tell me, your
Yes.
career, your path, your dreams. Because my hope is that whoever's listening is going to impact them.
And that is literally what it's all about. I love that. I love the concept because I think so often we kind of look at each other and we're like, oh, we probably would have nothing in common. Or maybe that imposter syndrome will tell you, oh, I can't have this. I can't interview this person. I don't, have the right education or the right words to say. But yes, you may have more in common than what you think. And the only way
Yeah.
to do is to actually get out there and tell your story.
And I've
Okay.
met so many wonderful people along the way. It has been such a beautiful journey. Like everyone that I've interviewed, everyone that I've met through Instagram, social media is such a
Mhm.
beautiful platform when used the right way. It's just amazing.
When used the right way. You said it, but it needs to be more yeses from people like you, like me, every woman who is listening. If you have that dream, that vision that God put in your belly, say yes now. And as Cynthia said, just start. It's not
Yes.
going to be perfect because God is preparing you for something that you have not even seen yet. You haven't even seen it. So how could you
Mhm.
know even where to start? But you have to say yes and start. Cynthia, where can we find you and follow you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm Hey Cynthia Martinez, so my full name with Hey in the front, and then on all Apple, Spotify, so it's the Glow Up Social Girls, and then we also have the YouTube channel, and it's the same, the Glow Up Social Girls.
All right. Okay, Cynthia, tell us what's next for you. Where do you see yourself in 2 years? What do we see us accomplishing with the Globe Social Girls or anything else for that matter?
Yeah, I'm going to continue on with the podcast, just keep building that community, keep pouring into that community. I want to start doing live events where, we do meetups, in different states, depending on, the amount of listeners I have in certain states. So that's like one of my goals. And then one of my bigger goals is to write my book. So I want to, share my testimony and write it in a book.
Yeah, you definitely have some books in you. Cynthia, tell us, I want to give you back the floor. And we talked today about your healing journey and how people can begin to walk out their visions and their dreams and silence any noise and address those things that may have happened to them in the past. I want to give you back the floor. And if you can just give our listeners something to take with them throughout the week, something that they can just a sound bite for the conversation we've had today.
Yeah, I would say definitely go for that dream that you have, that you keep thinking about. You're thinking about it over and over for a certain reason. So just go for it, just start. You're not going to have everything at the beginning. It's going to be messy, but it's going to be fun. So just go for it. And I always like to say, remember you are worthy and you are meant to be here for a reason and for a purpose. So don't ever lose sight of that. I always like to remind myself, don't ever lose the wonder, because when we
Mm.
forget about the wonder, we forget who we are.
Don't ever lose the wonder. That's so good. All right, Cynthia, I want to thank you so much for coming and pouring on this well. I love conversations that just stir my soul, that just gets me all worked up. I always feel they say that the things that you're most passionate about gets you the most riled up about and riled up about. And it's conversations like this, it's testimonies like this, it's just being transparent and living your truth. And I hope that, and I know that there are women out there that are going to take this and run with it. And I ask that if you were inspired by this or you know someone who will be, we ask that you share. We ask that you share it with them. Follow Cynthia on all social medias. I'll put all of her information in the description below. Thank you, Cynthia, for joining us here at the Well. I really appreciate
Yeah,
you so much.
thank you. Thank you for
Thank
inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Woman Witness podcast, The Stories at the Well. I'm your host, Leah Fortier. Perhaps you are chosen for such a time as this to write, to tell your story, your truth. Until next time.